The cold bit through Marcus Webb's coat as he stood on the courthouse steps, watching his breath crystallize in the Denver morning air. Inside, the judge had just signed the papers that made everything official. The house went to Jennifer. The retirement account split 60-40 in her favor. The truck stayed his only because she didn't want it. 58 years old, and the sum of his life fit in the cab of a rusted F-150. Richard Caldwell descended the steps like a man who owned them, cashmere overcoat perfect against the February wind, leather briefcase catching the weak sunlight. He stopped 2 feet from Marcus, close enough that the cologne reached first. The smile came next, the kind that didn't touch the eyes. "Face it, Webb, you're finished. A broken man with nothing left." Marcus's hands stayed in his pockets, fingers curled against the fabric. He'd worked 32 years underground, pulling copper from the earth until his back bent and his lungs wheezed. Copper Ridge Mine had closed 6 months ago, scattering the crew like dust. Some found work in the oil fields. Others moved east to the factories. Marcus had stayed, fixing tractors for ranchers, patching water pumps, doing anything that paid enough to cover the lawyer fees that had bled him dry. Behind Caldwell, through the glass doors, Jennifer stood with Emma. 9 years old now, dark hair pulled back the way her mother liked it, pink jacket too thin for the weather. She wouldn't look at him, hadn't looked at him through the entire hearing. Her gaze stayed fixed on the marble floor, small hands twisted together. Marcus wanted to call out, to say something that would make her understand, but the words stuck in his throat the way they always did. Jennifer's hand rested on Emma's shoulder, protective, claiming. The message clear enough. "You made your choice. The mine over us, just like your father." The accusation had landed 3 years ago during one of their last real conversations, back when they still fought instead of just signing papers. Jennifer's voice sharp with years of resentment, throwing his father's ghost between them like a weapon she knew would cut deep. Thomas Webb had died when Marcus was 12, crushed under a support beam in a collapse that shouldn't have happened. The company called it operator error, paid out nothing. His mother remarried within 2 years, moved to California, left the past behind like dirty laundry. Marcus had stayed in Colorado, drawn to the mines the way some men were drawn to the bottle, trying to understand what his father had chased into the dark, trying to prove something he couldn't name. Now here he stood, the pattern complete, another Webb man who'd let the earth take everything. The envelope waited in his truck, forwarded 3 times before finding him at the motel where he'd been staying. Legal letterhead from Silver Pine, a town he'd never heard of, tucked somewhere in the Rockies. The lawyer's name meant nothing. Harold Brennan, attorney at law, but the first line had caught him. "You are named as beneficiary in the estate of Samuel Blackwood, deceased." Marcus had read it twice in the courthouse parking lot, engine running for heat, trying to place the name. Samuel Blackwood. Nothing, no memory, no connection. The letter explained in careful legal language that Samuel Blackwood had died 3 weeks prior. Cardiac arrest, found in an abandoned mine where he'd been living. The property passed to Marcus as sole heir, along with all debts, taxes, and responsibilities. Taxes owed, $8,500. Due in 90 days. The land itself meant nothing without money to keep it. 40 acres of mountain wilderness, a collapsed mine, cabin ruins. Worth maybe $60,000 if he could find a buyer. Enough to start over somewhere, maybe rent a place where Emma could visit. If Jennifer allowed it, if Emma wanted to. The phone call came that night. Marcus sat on the motel bed, container of cold Chinese food balanced on his knee, when Emma's name lit up the screen. His thumb hovered over the answer button, heart suddenly loud in his ears. "Sweetie, Daddy," her voice small, uncertain. "Mommy says you have to go away for a while." The food container crumpled slightly in his grip. "I have to take care of some business. Up in the mountains. But I'll call you every night, I promise." Silence on the line, just the faint sound of breathing. Then quieter still, "Are you leaving like Grandpa did?" Mommy said Grandpa chose the mine over family too. The words hit like a fist to the sternum. Marcus closed his eyes, seeing his father's face the way he remembered it. Tired, determined, gone before they could make peace. "I'm not leaving you, Emma. I'm trying to make things better. I'll be back soon." "Okay," the word barely audible. "I love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweetheart. So much." The line went dead. Marcus sat in the silence afterward, the room pressing close around him. The photo on his phone showed Emma at her 8th birthday party, gap-toothed smile, holding up a homemade card that read, "Best Dad Ever" in crayon. He'd been late to that party, emergency call from the mine. A pump had failed, flooding the lower shafts. He'd arrived with wet boots and apologies, and Emma had smiled anyway because that's what she did. She forgave him. Over and over, she forgave him. Until she didn't. The drive to Silver Pine took 4 hours, Highway 285 climbing through foothills that gave way to steeper grades, snow accumulating on the shoulders. Marcus kept the heater on full blast, windows cracking ice at the edges. The towns grew smaller as elevation increased. Pine forest pressed close to the road, dark and dense, interrupted by clearings where old homesteads sagged under winter's weight. Silver Pine appeared around a bend just after 3 in the afternoon, population sign reading 412. Main Street stretched 2 blocks, lined with businesses that looked like they'd been there since the Eisenhower administration. A hardware store with faded paint, a diner with a neon sign flickering open, a gas station advertising diesel at prices that made Marcus wince. He pulled into the diner parking lot, joints stiff from the drive. Inside, the warmth hit like a wall, carrying smells of coffee and fryer grease. A handful of locals occupied the booths, conversations pausing as he entered. The waitress behind the counter looked up, smile automatic. "Help you, hun? Just coffee?" "Black." She poured without comment, sliding the mug across laminate worn smooth by decades of use. Marcus wrapped both hands around the ceramic, letting the heat seep into his fingers. Through the window, the mountains rose sharp against the gray sky, peaks lost in cloud cover. Somewhere up there, Samuel Blackwood had died alone. The door chimed as someone entered. Marcus glanced up and found a woman in Sheriff's Department tan, badge catching the overhead lights. Mid-40s, dark hair pulled back, eyes that took in everything with practiced assessment. She stopped at the counter, ordered coffee, then turned and met his gaze directly. "You're Marcus Webb." Not a question. Marcus set down his mug, suddenly aware of how he must look. 3 days without shaving, coat that had seen better years, everything about him screaming broke and desperate. "I am. How'd you know?" She smiled, tired but genuine. "Small town. Harold Brennan mentioned someone would be coming to handle Samuel's estate. I'm Deputy Ellen Hayes, off duty, but old habits. Mind if I sit?" Marcus gestured to the stool beside him. Ellen settled in, cradling her own mug, and for a moment they sat in silence. When she spoke again, her voice dropped low enough that the other patrons couldn't hear. "Be careful up there. Samuel's place, I mean. Congressman Dale Hutchins has been trying to buy that land for 10 years. Samuel wouldn't sell. Died before Hutchins could force him out." The name registered vaguely. Marcus had seen it on campaign signs during election season, the kind of face that appeared in commercials promising most and family values. Clean-cut, silver-haired, everything a politician should look like. Why would a congressman care about abandoned mine land? Ellen's jaw tightened, something dark flickering behind her eyes. "Hutchins owns half this town, wants the other half. That property of Samuel's sits right in the middle of his planned development. Luxury ski resort, condos for the Denver crowd looking to buy mountain authenticity. Samuel fought him in court, won but died a week later. Some folks think—" She stopped, shook her head. The implication hung between them anyway. Heavy as smoke. "You think Hutchins had something to do with Samuel's death?" "I think a lot of things. Can't prove any of them." She met his eyes, and the exhaustion there went deeper than missed sleep. "My husband died in a mine accident 15 years ago. He'd been looking into the Hutchins family. Business dealings, zoning violations. Nothing concrete, but he was getting close to something. Then the support beam failed and Jack was gone. Investigation ruled it accidental. Case closed." Marcus felt something cold settle in his gut. "I'm sorry." Ellen shrugged, but her knuckles whitened around the mug. "Just watch yourself. Hutchins is smooth. Uses lawyers and money, not guns. But he gets what he wants. And right now, he wants your land." The address Harold Brennan had provided led Marcus up a Forest Service road gone to ruts and ice. The truck fishtailed twice before he found traction. 4-wheel drive, grinding against frozen mud. Trees closed in on both sides, branches scraping the paint, until the road ended at a clearing where a cabin hunched against the mountainside. Calling it a cabin was generous. Half the roof had collapsed inward, beams jutting like broken ribs. The walls leaned, logs rotted at the base where snow had melted and frozen in cycles. The windows were dark sockets, glass long gone. But smoke rose from the chimney, a thin gray line against the sky. Marcus killed the engine and sat for a moment, hand on the door. The envelope from Harold Brennan lay on the passenger seat, along with the deed transfer papers and a handwritten note that had arrived yesterday. The note read simply, "Tom will be there. He knew Samuel. He'll help." The snow crunched under his boots as he approached. The porch steps groaned but held. Before he could knock, the door swung open and a man filled the frame. Late 60s, barrel-chested despite his age, with a face carved by weather and time. Gray beard, flannel shirt under a canvas coat, hands thick with calluses. Eyes the color of slate, measuring Marcus the way a foreman measured new hires. "You're Webb." The voice carried the rasp of someone who'd spent years breathing dust. Marcus nodded. "And you're Tom. Thomas Brennan." "Harold's my son, but everyone calls me Old Tom. Been keeping the place from freezing solid since Samuel passed." He stepped back, gesturing inside. "Come on. Cold enough to freeze spit out here." The interior was warmer than expected, heat radiating from a wood stove that glowed red in the corner. Someone had cleared the debris, organized what remained into something livable. A cot with blankets, a table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with canned goods and water jugs. On the walls, photographs hung in mismatched frames, showing faces Marcus didn't recognize. Tom poured coffee from a percolator on the stove, handed Marcus a tin cup. "Samuel asked me to look after the place if anything happened to him. Figured his heir would show up eventually." "Why me?" Marcus blew on the coffee, steam rising between them. "I never met Samuel Blackwood. Don't know why he'd leave me anything." Tom settled into one of the chairs, gesturing for Marcus to take the other. "Samuel didn't have family. Parents dead, never married, lived alone most of his life. But he knew your name. Had it written down in his papers, along with instructions. Said when the time came, you'd be the one to inherit. That doesn't make sense." "No, but Samuel didn't do things without reason." Tom's eyes drifted to the photographs on the wall. "That's him there, with his father." Marcus followed his gaze to a faded color print showing 2 men standing before a mine entrance. The older one held a pickaxe, face weathered but proud. The younger man, barely more than a boy, stood close, one hand on the older man's shoulder. Something in their postures spoke of connection, of shared purpose. Richard Blackwood and his son Samuel. Took that photo in 1962, year before Richard died. How did he die? Tom's expression darkened. That's the question, isn't it? Official cause was heart failure. 53 years old, healthy as an ox one day, dead the next. Samuel never believed it. Spent the rest of his life trying to prove otherwise. Prove what? That Richard Blackwood was murdered. The words sat between them like a stone. Marcus set down his coffee, suddenly cold despite the stove's heat. Who would murder a mine owner? Tom stood, moved to a locked trunk against the far wall. He produced a key from his pocket, old brass worn smooth. The trunk opened with a creak of hinges that hadn't been oiled in years. Inside, papers lay stacked and organized, decades of careful preservation. This is what Samuel left for you. Everything he couldn't prove. Everything he spent 60 years collecting. Tom pulled out a folder, set it on the table. Start with this. Marcus opened the folder. The first document was a newspaper clipping, yellowed and brittle, dated March 1963. The headline read, "Local mine owner Richard Blackwood dies after losing property to business partner." The article detailed a lawsuit, a bitter dispute over land rights and ore claims. Richard Blackwood had been forced to sell his mine to his partner, Robert Hutchins, just weeks before his death. The sale price, $5,000 for a property worth 20 times that. Marcus looked up. Hutchins, as in Dale Hutchins. Robert was Dale's father. Built the family fortune on what he stole from Richard Blackwood. Tom's voice carried a weight that spoke of old anger, carefully banked. Samuel always said Robert poisoned Richard. Literally, put something in the water to make him sick. weak, unable to fight the legal battles. Then swooped in and took everything. But no proof, not the kind that holds up in court. Samuel tried, Lord knows he tried, but the county coroner who signed Richard's death certificate paid off the judge who approved the sale, Hutchins's brother-in-law. The sheriff? On Hutchins's payroll, this whole town was corrupt, and Samuel was just a kid. Marcus shuffled through more documents. Legal papers, medical records with suspicious gaps, letters from Richard to county officials, pleading for investigations that never came. And underneath it all, a hand-drawn map, faded but detailed, showing 3 levels of mine shafts descending into the mountain. Tom leaned over, tapping the map. Samuel made that before he died. Spent 60 years working that mine in secret, keeping it from Hutchins' hands. Restored the ventilation, shored up the supports, extracted just enough silver to survive. He pointed to a notation at the bottom of level 3. This here, this is what matters. Section 7, Father's Secret. Marcus studied the marking, barely legible in the dim light. Samuel wrote something else too, day before he died. Tom reached back into the trunk, pulled out a letter, envelope unsealed. Said to give this to you. The paper trembled slightly in Marcus's hands as he unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky but deliberate, the script of someone who knew time was running short. Whoever inherits this, trust no one in Silverpine. Hutchins is not what he seems. My father died for this mine. I protected it for 60 years. The real treasure is not the silver. It's what my father hid to keep it from evil men. Follow the rails, find level 3. Tell the truth. SB Marcus read it twice, then looked at Tom. You believe this? That there's something hidden down there worth killing for? I believe Samuel believed it, and I believe he died trying to protect it. Tom's face was stone. Whether that makes it true, I can't say. But I know this. Dale Hutchins has been circling this property like a buzzard since Samuel was found. Filed a claim saying the mine is on disputed land, that his family has rights going back to the original purchase. He's trying to take it legally this time. This time? Tom's silence was answer enough. Marcus stood, moved to the window, looking out at the darkening forest. Through the trees, he could just make out the beginning of the rails, 2 thin lines of rust disappearing into the snow. Why would Samuel leave this to me? I'm nobody, just a broken-down miner with nothing to lose. Maybe that's exactly why. Tom's voice softened. Samuel knew what it was to lose everything. Knew what it meant to fight alone. Maybe he figured you'd understand, or maybe he just needed someone who couldn't be bought. I don't have money to fight, Congressman. No, but you have the deed, and you have Samuel's map. That's more than anyone else has had in 60 years. Marcus turned back, studying the older man. What's your stake in this? Tom met his eyes without flinching. I worked these mountains my whole life. Knew Richard Blackwood when I was a kid. Good man, honest, didn't deserve what happened to him. And Samuel, he was like a son to me after my own boy moved to Denver for law school. I made a promise I'd help see this through, however it ends. The trust in those words settled something in Marcus's chest. He looked down at the map, at the careful notations Samuel had made. 3 levels, 60 years of work, a secret buried at the bottom of the mountain. When can we go down? Tom shook his head slowly. Not we. The tunnels are narrow in places, unstable. I'm too old, too big. You'll have to go alone. But I can guide you through the upper levels, show you what Samuel showed me. After that, you're on your own. Tomorrow then. Not tomorrow, Tom pointed to the window. Storm coming tonight. 3 feet of snow expected, maybe more. Radio says it'll last 2 days. We wait it out here, then we go. Marcus glanced at his phone. No signal this far up the mountain. No way to call Emma, to keep his promise. The guilt sat heavy, familiar as old scars. I told my daughter I'd call her every night. You can try the landline. Tom gestured to an ancient rotary phone mounted on the wall. Sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. Depends on the weather. Marcus dialed, listening to the clicks and static. The phone rang 4 times before Jennifer answered, her voice sharp with irritation. What? It's Marcus. Can I talk to Emma? She's doing homework. I'll tell her you called. Wait, please. Just for a minute. I promised her. A long pause, then muffled sounds of Jennifer calling Emma's name. Footsteps. The phone changing hands. Daddy? Emma's voice, small and uncertain, twisted something in his chest. Hey, sweetheart. I'm sorry I didn't call last night. I'm up in the mountains and the service is bad. Where are you? A place called Silver Pine. It's near the mine I inherited. Remember I told you about it? Yeah, Emma's voice dropped even lower. Daddy, a man came to our house today. What man? He said his name was Mr. Caldwell. He said you're trying to take me away from Mommy. Is that true? Marcus's hand tightened on the receiver. That's not true, Emma. Shush, Emma, I would never. In the background, Jennifer's voice cut through. That's enough, Emma. But Mom, I want to. The line went dead. Marcus stood holding the phone, dial tone buzzing, until Tom gently took it from his hand and hung it up. They're playing dirty. Marcus turned away, jaw clenched. Caldwell was Jennifer's lawyer. Works for Hutchins now, I'd bet. Trying to leverage Emma to make me sell. That's their game. Pressure, threats, legal maneuvering. They can't just take the land, so they'll make you want to give it up. Marcus looked at the map again, at Samuel's final message. Trust no one. Tell the truth. A lifetime of fighting, and in the end, Samuel had died alone, hoping a stranger would finish what he'd started. I should just sell. Take whatever Hutchins offers, use it to fight for custody. Emma matters more than dead men's secrets. Tom didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was careful. That's your choice. No one would blame you for putting your daughter first. But understand this. If you sell to Hutchins, whatever Samuel protected for 60 years gets buried forever. The truth dies with it, and men like Hutchins win again. What truth could be worth more than my daughter? Maybe the kind of truth that shows your daughter what standing for something looks like. Tom moved to the stove, added more wood. My boy Harold, the lawyer, he grew up watching this town rot from the inside, watching good people get crushed by men with money. When he went to law school, I told him, learn the system, then use it to fight back. That's what he's trying to do. That's what Ellen Hayes is trying to do. And that's what Samuel died trying to do. They're all fighting the same fight. Question is, are you? Marcus had no answer. He stood in the small cabin as night pressed against the windows, feeling the weight of choices he didn't want to make. Outside, the first flakes of the storm began to fall, silent and thick, covering the rails that led into the mountain. The storm hit with the force Tom had predicted, wind howling through the pines, snow falling so thick the world disappeared beyond the cabin walls. Marcus spent the first day organizing Samuel's papers, reading through decades of careful documentation. Letters to state officials, reports of water contamination, medical records showing arsenic levels in Richard Blackwood's system, discovered during an autopsy Samuel had somehow convinced a doctor to perform years after burial. Every lead had ended in a wall of silence. Every official investigation closed without findings. The pattern was clear. The Hutchins family had bought every authority that mattered, and Samuel had fought alone against an enemy that controlled the board. On the second day, the snow eased enough for Marcus to venture outside. He followed the rails up the slope, boots sinking past his ankles, until he reached the first structure Tom had told him about. The building leaned drunkenly. Half its roof collapsed under snow weight. Inside, the walls were covered in graffiti, most of it decades old. But one marking was fresh, spray-painted in red across the back wall. Stay off Hutchins' property. Violators will be prosecuted. Marcus stood staring at the words, anger building in slow and cold. Hutchins didn't own this land, not yet, but he was already claiming it, warning off anyone who might challenge him. The footprints led away from the building toward the upper plateau. Recent prints, maybe 2 days old, partially filled with snow, but still visible. Someone had been up here during the storm, marking territory. Marcus followed the prints until they reached a second building, larger and better preserved. This one had been Samuel's real home, Tom had said, the place he'd lived when he wasn't working deeper in the mine. Marcus pushed open the door, hinges screaming, and stepped into cold darkness. A flashlight beam cut through the gloom from deeper inside. Marcus froze, hand going to the pocket where he'd put Tom's hunting knife. The beam swung toward him, and a voice called out, smooth and confident, "Mr. Webb, I was hoping we'd meet." The man who emerged from the shadows wore a parka that cost more than Marcus's truck, snow pants that had never seen real use, boots straight from a catalog. Mid-60s, silver hair, perfectly styled, even after hiking through a blizzard, face tanned in that way that spoke of ski vacations and golf courses. His smile showed too many teeth. Dale Hutchins. We haven't been properly introduced. He extended a hand. Marcus didn't take it. You're trespassing. Hutchins lowered his hand, the smile never wavering. Actually, I'm not. This land is under dispute. My family has held deed claims going back to 1964, when my father purchased it from Richard Blackwood. Samuel inherited it from his father. Samuel Blackwood was a squatter who never had legal title. Hutchins produced a folder from inside his coat, flipped it open to show official-looking documents. The sale was legitimate, processed through county records, signed by both parties. If Samuel had a claim, he should have filed it 60 years ago. He tried. You blocked it. No one blocked anything. There simply wasn't a case. Hutchins closed the folder, tucked it away. Look, Mr. Webb, I'm not here to argue history. I'm here to make you an offer. $50,000, can't right now. Sign over any claim you think you have and walk away clean. Marcus studied the other man, seeing the calculation behind the friendly facade. For worthless disputed land, you're offering $50,000? I'm offering a fair price for a quick resolution. Save us both the time and expense of litigation. Hutchins's smile tightened slightly. You're a practical man. You've been through a difficult divorce. You have a daughter who needs stability. Take the money. Start fresh somewhere else. The mention of Emma made Marcus's vision narrow. How do you know about my daughter? I make it my business to know who I'm dealing with. Hutchins stepped closer, voice dropping. Your ex-wife's lawyer is an associate of mine. Richard Caldwell. Good attorney. He tells me custody arrangements can be very fluid when one parent demonstrates unstable behavior. Moving around, living in condemned buildings, pursuing wild conspiracy theories about respected families. Marcus's fists clenched, but he kept his voice level. You're threatening my daughter to steal land you don't own. I'm offering you a way out. Hutchins pulled a checkbook from his coat, along with a pen. $50,000. More money than you've probably seen in one place. Enough to secure a good apartment, maybe hire your own lawyer. Give your daughter the stability she deserves. And what happens to this place if I sign? It gets developed properly. Jobs for the community. Economic growth. Everything Samuel Blackwood was too stubborn to see. Hutchins clicked the pen, ready to write. What's it going to do? Marcus thought of Emma, of her small voice on the phone asking if he was leaving like his father had. He thought of Jennifer, of years of accusation, of choosing the mine over family. He thought of Samuel, dying alone, protecting something he believed mattered more than comfort or safety. No. Hutchins' smile vanished. That's a mistake. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. Then let me be clear. Hutchins' voice hardened, the friendly mask dropping completely. I've been patient with this situation for years. Samuel was old, stubborn, not worth the effort to force out. But you're different. You're vulnerable. I own the sheriff in this county. I own the judge. I have lawyers on retainer who can tie you up in court until you've spent every penny you don't have. And if that doesn't work, I have other options. Accidents happen in old mines, collapses, gas leaks. People disappear in these mountains all the time. Marcus felt something cold and focused settle in his chest. You threatening me? I'm explaining reality. You have 48 hours to reconsider. After that, I'm filing for emergency condemnation based on public safety concerns. And I'll make sure Child Protective Services gets a full report about a father living in hazardous conditions, putting himself at risk, demonstrating the kind of behavior that leads to losing custody. Hutchins turned toward the door, then stopped. Your daughter's name is Emma, right? 9 years old? Pretty kid. Be a shame if anything disrupted her life more than it already has been. The red that edged Marcus's vision had nothing to do with the cold. He took a step forward before forcing himself to stop. Hutchins smiled again, reading the restraint. Smart man. Think about my offer. The door swung open and 2 men entered, thick-shouldered, wearing security company patches. Hutchins's private muscle, there to make sure Marcus didn't do anything stupid. The 3 of them left without another word. Marcus stood in the empty building, listening to the snowmobiles start up outside, their engines fading down the mountain. His hands shook, partly from cold, partly from rage he couldn't act on. When he made it back to the cabin an hour later, Tom was waiting on the porch, rifle cradled in his arms. Saw Hutchins's crew heading up. Figured you might need backup. Marcus climbed the steps, legs heavy with exhaustion. He threatened Emma. Tom's face went hard as granite. That's how he operates. Can't threaten you directly, so he goes for what matters. That's how they got to Samuel in the end. Threatened to demolish Richard's grave, claimed it was on disputed property. Samuel had a bad heart, and the stress finally took him. Marcus sank into the porch chair, head in his hands. Maybe I should just sell, take his money, use it to fight for Emma. What am I doing here? Chasing dead men's secrets, while my daughter thinks I abandoned her. Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then, you know what your father died for? Marcus looked up. A paycheck, same as every other miner. No. Tom leaned the rifle against the wall, sat in the other chair. Your father died because the company cut corners on safety to save money. Inspectors were paid off, regulations ignored. When that beam failed, it failed because someone decided profit mattered more than lives. And when it was over, they paid out nothing, blamed it on operator error, and kept running the same way. How many more men died in that mine before it closed? I don't know. 12. I looked it up after you mentioned Copper Ridge. 12 more men in 30 years, all from safety violations that should have been caught. All because no one stood up and said enough. Tom met his eyes. Your father didn't choose the mine over you. He died fighting a system that didn't value his life. There's a difference. Marcus felt something crack in his chest. I couldn't save him. Couldn't even understand why it mattered so much to him. And now I'm doing the same thing to Emma. Or you're showing her what her grandfather couldn't show you. That some fights matter. That men like Hutchins don't get to win just because they have money and power. Easy to say when it's not your kid on the line. No, but it was my friend. Tom's voice went quiet. Ellen's husband, Jack. He died in a mine too. Hutchins owned it through a shell company. Safety violations everywhere. Jack was documenting them, building a case. Then the accident happened, and all the evidence disappeared. Ellen's been fighting ever since, trying to prove what she knows in her gut. If you walk away now, Hutchins buries whatever Samuel protected, and the next person who tries to stand up gets crushed too. The door opened, and Ellen Hayes stepped onto the porch, off-duty clothes dusted with snow. I was in town, heard Hutchins' crew went up the mountain. Everyone okay? Marcus gestured to the chair Tom vacated. Hutchins made his play, $50,000 to sign over the claim and leave. Ellen whistled low. He's scared. Wouldn't offer that much if he wasn't. What did you tell him? No, she smiled, tired but genuine. Good, because I've got something you need to see. She pulled a folder from inside her coat, set it on the small table between them. I've been going through old case files. My husband's notes from before he died. He was investigating the Hutchins family, but I never knew how deep it went. Found this in a storage unit Jack rented under a fake name. Took me years to track it down. Marcus opened the folder. Inside were photographs, grainy but clear enough. Robert Hutchins standing with men whose faces Marcus didn't recognize. Outside what looked like a warehouse. Another photo showed the same men loading barrels into trucks marked with biohazard symbols. Ellen pointed to one of the men. That's Anthony Ritchie, organized crime, Boston area. Dead now, but in the 60s he ran waste disposal for half the East Coast. My guess? Hutchins was paid to dump toxic waste in the mine. Poison the water supply, blame it on mining operations. Force Richard Blackwood out. That's murder. That's what Jack thought. But he died before he could prove the connection. Ellen's jaw tightened. These photos aren't enough by themselves. But if Samuel hid something in that mine that ties it all together, evidence that Hutchins' father deliberately poisoned Richard, then we have a case. Not just for fraud, for murder and conspiracy. Federal charges that can't be bought off by local judges. Tom leaned forward. You're saying whatever's in level 3 could bring down Hutchins. I'm saying it's worth the risk to find out. Ellen looked at Marcus. But it's your call. You walk away, no one blames you. You go down there, you might find nothing. Or you might find something that puts an even bigger target on your back. Marcus thought of Emma's voice on the phone. Thought of his father, dead under a mountain while men in offices decided his life wasn't worth the cost of proper safety. Thought of Samuel, 60 years of solitary fighting, hoping someone would care enough to finish it. When can we go? Tom checked his watch. Storm breaks tomorrow morning. We should move at first light. Hutchins filed for emergency condemnation. He'll have a court order within 2 days. After that, county sheriff can legally bar you from the property pending resolution. Ellen stood. I'll document everything. Official police witness. Whatever we find, it'll hold up in court. She paused at the door. One more thing. My body cam footage is admissible evidence. If anything happens down there, if Hutchins tries something, it's on record. You think he'd try to kill us? I think he's already tried to kill one person to keep the secret. Ellen's eyes were hard. Men like Hutchins don't stop at one. After she left, Marcus and Tom sat in silence, watching the last light fade from the sky. The storm had passed, leaving the world buried in quiet. Somewhere up the mountain, the rails waited, half hidden under snow, leading toward truth or oblivion. Tom finally spoke, voice rough with age and smoke. Samuel's last notebook entry was the day before he died. Want to know what it said? Marcus nodded. Tom, if you're reading this, I didn't make it. The truth is in level 3, section 7, behind the false wall. Tell them what the Hutchins family did. Make them pay. Sam, a false wall. Marcus closed his eyes. So we're not just looking for documents. We're looking for a hidden chamber. Samuel spent 60 years preparing for someone to find it. He wouldn't have hidden it if it wasn't worth protecting. Tom stood slowly, joints creaking. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we go deeper than anyone's been in 60 years, and we find out what was worth dying for. Marcus lay awake that night on Samuel's cot, listening to the wind in the pines. His phone showed Emma's contact photo, the last message he'd sent still unread. He typed out another. I love you, sweetheart. Everything I'm doing is to make things right. I promise. Dad. The message failed to send. No signal this far up the mountain. Marcus set the phone aside, staring at the ceiling where shadows moved in the stove's dying light. In the corner, Samuel's map lay spread on the table, waiting, 3 levels descending into darkness. Section 7 marked at the very bottom, with 2 words that seemed to glow in the dim light. Father's secret. Outside, the temperature dropped below 0 and the rails disappeared completely under fresh snow. But Marcus knew they were still there, leading towards something Samuel had believed was worth everything, worth 60 years alone, worth dying to protect. Whether Marcus would find it worth losing Emma was a question he couldn't answer. But in the morning, he would follow those rails into the mountain. And whatever waited at the end, whatever truth Samuel had hidden in the frozen depths, Marcus would bring it back to the light, even if it cost him everything. Dawn broke cold and clear, the kind of morning where breath hung visible for seconds before dissolving. Marcus stood at the mine entrance while Tom adjusted the harness straps, checking each connection with the methodical care of someone who'd seen what happened when equipment failed underground. Ellen arrived as the sun cleared the eastern ridge, her department SUV parking beside Marcus's truck. She wore civilian clothes but carried her service weapon openly, along with the body cam clipped to her jacket. The red recording light blinked steady as she approached. Everything we find goes on record. No editing, no selective footage. Whatever's down there, the world sees it. Tom handed Marcus a helmet with a mounted lamp, the kind modern miners used instead of the old carbide lights. Batteries are fresh. You've got 8 hours of burn time, but don't plan on using more than 4. Air gets thin past level 2, and we don't know what shape the ventilation's in. Marcus buckled the helmet, feeling its weight settle familiar across his skull. 30 years underground had taught him the language of mines, the way pressure changed in your ears when shafts ran deep, the smell of bad air before instruments detected it. But those had been active operations with teams and safety protocols. This was different. This was descending into a tomb that one man had kept breathing through sheer stubbornness. The entrance yawned before them, timbers reinforced with newer wood, where Samuel had shored up the original supports. Rails disappeared into darkness, their metal surfaces scraped clean in the center where ore carts had run for decades. Marcus clicked on his headlamp, the beam cutting through gloom that seemed to swallow light. Level 1 stable. Tom pointed to markings on the wall, numbers and symbols in faded paint. Samuel maintained it like it was still operational. Ventilation system runs on natural updraft through the old shafts. You'll feel the airflow when you reach the junction. That's where things get tricky. Show me. They entered single file, Marcus leading, Ellen behind him, Tom bringing up the rear despite his earlier claim that he couldn't make the descent. The temperature dropped immediately, that particular cold that comes from stone never touched by sun. Their breath created clouds that drifted in the lamplight, and somewhere deep in the mountain, water dripped with the patience of centuries. The tunnel stretched straight for 50 yards before curving right. The walls showed tool marks, regular and purposeful, the work of men who'd carved this passage by hand before machinery made it easier. Wooden supports arched overhead every 10 feet, and Marcus noted the mixture of old timber gone gray with age and newer posts Samuel had installed. The man had essentially rebuilt the entire first level by himself. Here, Tom stopped at a wider section where 3 passages branched off. Main shaft continues straight. That's how you reach level 2. The left tunnel's collapsed about 20 yards in, been that way since the 60s. Right tunnel leads to the old equipment room. That's where Samuel kept his tools, his living quarters when he worked deep. Ellen swept her light across the junction. These markings, what do they mean? Tom traced his finger along symbols carved into the support beam. SAM system. Circle means safe passage. X means dangerous or unstable. Triangle means ventilation shaft. He pointed down the main tunnel. You'll see more as you go deeper. Follow the circles. Marcus knelt, examining the rails. Fresh scrape marks in the rust, recent enough that oxidation hadn't dulled them. Someone's been down here lately. Tom's expression darkened. Sam mentioned hearing noises about 2 weeks before he died. Thought maybe it was the mountain settling. Could have been Hutchins' people, checking to see what they'd be dealing with, or planting something. Ellen's hand moved unconsciously toward her weapon. If they knew Samuel was getting old, if they thought he might die soon, they could have weakened supports to ensure the mine stayed closed permanently. Only one way to know. Marcus stood, adjusted his pack. I'm going to level 2. You two should stay here. Keep watch. Tom shook his head. I'm going with you to the junction. These old bones have made that trip before. Ellen stays topside, maintains communication via radio. Ellen pulled out a walkie-talkie, handed one to Marcus. Range is good for about 200 feet underground. Past that, you're on your own. Check in every 30 minutes. Miss a check-in, I'm calling state police. They moved deeper, leaving Ellen at the junction. The main tunnel descended at a gentle grade, rails guiding them down. Marcus's light caught glimpses of abandoned equipment, ore carts tilted on their sides, a wheelbarrow with its handles rotted away. The detritus of dead industry left when Robert Hutchins had seized the property and closed operations. After 10 minutes, they reached a steep section where the tunnel narrowed considerably. Tom stopped, breathing hard despite the easy pace. This is where I turn back. Past here, it gets tight. Old fat bastard like me won't fit through some of the squeezes. Marcus examined the passage ahead. The rails continued through an opening barely 3 feet wide. The ceiling dropped to less than 5 feet. He'd have to crouch and shuffle sideways in places. Level 2 junction is about 200 yards past this point. Tom pulled out Samuel's map, traced the route with a grimy finger. Junction has 4 branches. Main shaft continues down to level 3. The other 3 are all dead ends, played out veins, Samuel's father exhausted. You want the shaft marked with 2 circles and a triangle. That's the one with working ventilation. And level 3? Tom's face showed nothing but shadow in the harsh lamplight. Level 3 flooded in spring of '63. Snowmelt overwhelmed the pumps. Richard was too sick to fix them, and by the time he died, the entire lower level was underwater. Samuel said it took 20 years for the water to freeze solid, turning the tunnels into ice caves. How do I get through 3 feet of ice? You don't. Tom handed him an ice axe from his pack. But Samuel did. Spent 3 winters chipping away at the blockage, creating a passage just wide enough to squeeze through. It's there, but it's not easy. And once you're on the other side, the temperature drops to -20, maybe colder. You'll have an hour, maybe 90 minutes before hypothermia becomes a problem. Marcus took the axe, feeling its weight. What's in Section 7 worth that kind of risk? Truth. Tom's eyes caught the light, reflecting something fierce. the kind that powerful men kill to keep buried. Samuel believed his father hid evidence that would destroy the Hutchins family, not just documents, physical proof of murder and corruption. The kind that survives decades and still holds up in court. You believe that? I believe Samuel never lied to me in 40 years. And I believe he died trying to reach that chamber one last time. Tom gripped Marcus's shoulder, the gesture heavy with meaning. You don't have to do this. $50,000 is a lot of money. Enough to start over, fight for your daughter. No shame in walking away. Marcus thought of Emma's voice asking if he was leaving like his grandfather had. Thought of Jennifer's accusation, years of it, that he chose the mine over family. Thought of his father dying in darkness while men in offices decided his life wasn't worth the cost of proper safety. If I walk away, Hutchins buries whatever's down there, and the next person who tries to stand up gets crushed. Can't teach Emma to do the right thing if I don't do it myself. Tom's grip tightened briefly, then released. Radio check every 30 minutes. Miss One, we're coming in after you. The squeeze was worse than Tom had described. Marcus had to remove his pack and push it ahead, then turn sideways and shuffle through with his chin scraping one wall and his back pressed against the other. The helmet caught twice, forcing him to tilt his head at awkward angles. Claustrophobia pressed in, that old familiar fear that every miner learned to manage but never quite escaped. When he finally emerged into the wider passage beyond, his radio crackled. Ellen's voice came through distorted but clear. Status check through the squeeze, continuing to level 2 junction. Copy. Next check in 30. The tunnel opened gradually, the ceiling rising until Marcus could stand upright again. The air here tasted different, metallic and old, but the flow remained steady. Samuel's ventilation system worked as designed, pulling fresh air from above and cycling it through the shafts. The rails gleamed in his lamplight, recently traveled. Marcus knelt again, studying the marks. Boot prints in the dust. Large, size 12 or 13, with the distinctive lug pattern of tactical boots. Not work boots, not hiking boots. The kind military contractors and private security wore. Fresh enough that the edges remained sharp. Someone had been down here within the last week. Marcus keyed his radio. Tom, I've got fresh boot prints, recent activity. Static, then Tom's voice tight with concern. How recent? Days, maybe less. Professional boots, tactical pattern, get out, now. The command came too late. Behind Marcus, deeper in the tunnel, came the unmistakable sound of stone striking stone. Then another sound, deliberate and rhythmic. Someone hammering. Ellen's voice crackled urgently. Marcus, we've got company topside. 3 vehicles just pulled up. Hutchins' security team. Tom's breathing came harsh over the radio. They're cutting off your exit. It's a trap. Marcus killed his headlamp and pressed against the tunnel wall, ears straining. The hammering stopped. Silence stretched, broken only by the distant drip of water and his own pulse loud in his ears. Then footsteps, slow and measured, coming from the direction of level 2. A voice called out, amplified by the stone. Mr. Webb, you're trespassing on condemned property. Come out now and we can resolve this peacefully. Marcus recognized the voice, one of Hutchins' security guards from yesterday. He stayed silent, moving slowly deeper into the tunnel, away from the voice and toward level 2 junction. His pack scraped against the wall, the sound impossibly loud. We know you're down here. The voice grew closer. Mr. Hutchins has a legal order. This mine is being sealed for public safety. You've got one chance to leave under your own power. The radio crackled quietly, Ellen's whisper barely audible. They're entering the mine. 2 men armed, county sheriffs with them, claiming it's an emergency closure order. Tom's voice grim. Marcus, the support beam at the main entrance. They're rigging it with something. If they bring that down, you're trapped. Marcus moved faster, abandoning stealth for speed. The tunnel curved right, then opened into a larger chamber. 4 passages branched off exactly as Samuel's map had shown. He swept his light across the walls, finding the markings. 2 circles and a triangle on the second passage from the left. Behind him, lights appeared, multiple sources bobbing as men entered the chamber. 3 of them, Marcus counted, all wearing tactical gear and carrying professional equipment. The lead man held up a hand, signaling halt. End of the line, Webb. Turn around nice and slow. Marcus's light caught something else. The support beam at the chamber's center showed fresh tool marks, deep cuts that hadn't been there in Samuel's documentation photos. Someone had sawed through 3/4 of the beam's thickness, leaving just enough to hold for now. Ellen's voice crackled with static. Marcus, do you copy? They're setting charges at the entrance. You've got maybe 2 minutes. The lead security guard smiled without warmth. Congressman Hutchins sends his regards. Says to tell you that accidents happen to men who don't listen. Marcus backed toward the marked tunnel, hands raised, but moving deliberately. You're going to murder me for a piece of land? Not murder. The guard's smile widened. Tragic accident. Unstable mind, fool who ignored warnings, brought the mountain down on himself. Happens all the time in these old operations. Won't even make the front page. What's Hutchins paying you? Enough to retire somewhere warm. Now we can do this easy or hard. Easy, you sit down right here, we leave. And when the charges blow, it's over quick. Hard, we make sure you're still conscious when the ceiling comes down. Your choice, Chidro. Marcus's fingers found the ice axe on his belt. The tunnel behind him yawned dark and cold, leading down to level 3, to section 7, to whatever Samuel had died protecting. The mathematics were simple. He couldn't fight 3 armed men. Couldn't retreat back through the squeeze to the surface. Could only go deeper into cold that would kill him almost as surely as a collapsed tunnel. But deeper also meant whatever evidence Hutchins was willing to commit murder to hide. One of the other guards checked his watch. Charges blow in 90 seconds. Make your peace. Marcus turned and ran. Shouts erupted behind him. Then the crack of a pistol, the bullet sparking off stone inches from his head. He dove into the marked tunnel, hearing boots pounding in pursuit. The passage sloped steeply downward, rail guiding him through darkness broken only by his lamp's frantic beam. Behind him, more gunshots, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. A round took his pack, spinning him sideways. He lost his grip on the axe, heard it clatter away down the slope. Kept running, legs pumping, lungs burning. The passage opened into a junction, and suddenly the temperature plummeted. Marcus's breath froze instantly, vision clouding. Ahead, the tunnel ended in a wall of ice 3 feet thick, glowing blue-white in his lamplight. Footsteps behind him, close now, the lead guard's voice echoing. Nowhere left to run, Webb. Marcus looked at the ice wall, seeing where Samuel had chipped a passage through, a narrow opening, barely 18 inches wide, angling upward through the frozen blockage. Impossible to fit through with his pack and gear. Surface charges detonated with a muffled roar that shook the entire mountain. Dust rained from the ceiling, and somewhere above, timber cracked with the sound of breaking bones. The tunnel shuddered, and Marcus felt the pressure wave hit, his ears popping painfully. The guards stumbled, one falling. The lead man steadied himself against the wall, eyes wide. Son of a bitch actually did it. Hutchins brought it down. His companion keyed a radio. Boss, we're still inside. You just sealed us in with him. Static, then Dale Hutchins' voice, distant but clear. Unfortunate, but necessary. Your families will be well compensated for your service. You're going to kill your own men? The guard's voice rose with panic. We did everything you asked, and now you're witnesses. Hutchins sounded almost apologetic. Nothing personal, just business. The radio went dead. The 3 guards stared at each other, then at Marcus. The lead man's expression shifted from confidence to animal fear. He's killing all of us. We're buried alive. Marcus moved toward the ice wall. The guards didn't stop him, too busy processing their own mortality. He found the ice axe where it had fallen, gripped it with numb fingers, and began climbing into Samuel's passage. The ice was slick and brutally cold, burning exposed skin on contact. The passage angled upward at 45 degrees, just wide enough for shoulders if he kept his arms extended overhead. Marcus wedged himself into the opening and began to climb, using the axe to pull himself forward inch by inch. One of the guards called after him. Where does that lead? Level 3, Marcus's voice echoed strangely. If you want to live, follow me. Otherwise, die here and let Hutchins win. Behind him, he heard urgent discussion, then the scrape of equipment being shed. The guards were following. Marcus climbed faster, muscles screaming, cold biting through his clothes. The passage seemed endless, ice pressing from all sides, until finally it opened, and he tumbled out into a chamber unlike anything he had expected. Level 3 stretched before him, a cathedral of ice and stone. Frozen waterfalls hung from the ceiling, columns of translucent blue-green supporting the weight of the mountain above. The ore carts Samuel's father had filled sat frozen in place, silver ore glinting in the lamplight like trapped stars. Rails disappeared into side passages, all of it preserved in ice, a museum of the mine's final working day. The temperature was easily -20, and Marcus's sweat-soaked clothes began freezing to his skin. He had minutes before hypothermia set in, maybe less. His fingers were already losing feeling, and his breath came in painful gasps. The three guards emerged from the ice passage, their tactical gear inadequate for this cold. The lead man looked around, teeth already chattering. "We'll freeze to death down here." Marcus pulled out Samuel's map with clumsy fingers. Section 7, southwest corner, behind the false wall. If what Samuel said is true, there's a ventilation shaft. Way out, if. The guard laughed bitterly. "We're dead men on a maybe. You were dead the moment you took Hutchins' money." Marcus started moving along the rails, following the map's markings. This is your only chance at living long enough to testify against him. The chamber branched into passages, all of them identical walls of ice. Marcus counted ore carts, using them as landmarks the way Samuel's map indicated. Third cart, turn left. Seventh cart, right passage. His brain began fogging, hypothermia's early stages, but he forced himself to focus. One of the guards collapsed, simply sat down in the middle of the passage. "I can't feel my legs. Go on without me." His companion grabbed his arm, hauled him upright. "No one dies down here. We get out. We testify. We put Hutchins in prison for the rest of his miserable life. Move." They reached a section where the ice thinned, revealing the original stone walls. Marcus's light caught something carved into the rock. An arrow, and beneath it, numbers. 1963. The year Richard Blackwood died. The year Samuel's father had hidden whatever Hutchins feared most. The false wall was obvious once Marcus knew to look for it. Stones stacked too regularly, mortar that didn't match the surrounding rock. He grabbed the ice axe and began chipping away at the edges. The cold made the work agonizing, each swing sending shocks through his arms. "Let me." The lead guard took the axe, and suddenly three men worked together, taking turns, breath coming in ragged clouds. The wall fought them, but desperation gave them strength. The radio crackled weakly, Tom's voice barely audible through interference and distance. "Marcus, if you're alive, make noise. We're digging, but the collapse is bad." Marcus keyed the radio, but his frozen fingers couldn't manage the button. One of the guards tried, got nothing but static. No signal down here. The false wall crumbled, suddenly, stones falling inward to reveal a small chamber beyond. Metal filing cabinets stood against the back wall, each one coated in a layer of dust, but protected from the ice by the sealed room. A reel-to-reel tape recorder sat on a wooden table, next to a locked metal box. Marcus entered first, the others crowding behind. His headlamp illuminated walls covered in photographs, documents pinned in careful rows, decades of evidence organized with obsessive precision. Richard Blackwood had created a murder board 40 years before the term became common, and he'd done it knowing he was dying. The filing cabinets opened easily, their locks long since corroded. Inside the first, legal documents showing Robert Hutchins forging Richard's signature on sale papers. Notarized by a man who'd been dead 3 months at the time, confirmed by county records that showed the notary's death certificate preceding the sale date. The second cabinet held medical reports, blood work showing arsenic levels that climbed week by week, doctor's notes documenting Richard's suspicions that he was being poisoned, his request for investigation, and the county coroner's refusal to act. A handwritten journal in Richard's cramped script detailed every symptom, every attempt to get help, every door that closed in his face. The third cabinet contained photographs that made Marcus's stomach turn. Robert Hutchins with Anthony Ricci and his crew, shaking hands outside the mine entrance, barrels marked with biohazard symbols being unloaded. Another photo showed workers in protective suits dumping toxic waste directly into the mine's water supply. The dates written on the back spanned from 1961 to early 1963. One of the guards was reading over Marcus's shoulder. Holy Mother of God, they poisoned the entire water table. That's not just murder, that's environmental terrorism. The locked metal box yielded to the lead guard's knife, the old lock popping free. Inside, a leather-bound ledger showed payments, thousands of dollars flowing from Hutchins to county officials. Sheriff Tom Bradley, $500 monthly. Judge Henry Walsh, $1,000 monthly. County Coroner Dr. Philip Morrison, $750 monthly. A dozen other names all receiving regular payments from 1960 to 1963. And beneath the ledger, the reel-to-reel tape. A note taped to it in Richard's handwriting. June 1st, 1963. Robert's confession. Recorded without his knowledge during our last meeting. He doesn't know I'm dying. He doesn't know I already know. This is for my son. This is for the truth. Marcus lifted the tape, felt its weight. This was it. What Samuel had protected for 60 years, what Hutchins had killed to hide. The evidence that would destroy a family fortune built on poison and corruption. The radio crackled again, Ellen's voice cutting through. Marcus, we've broken through the outer collapse. State police are here. FBI is en route. Hutchins is in custody, but we need you alive to testify. Please respond. Marcus fumbled for the radio, managed to key it. Level 3, Section 7. We found it. Everything Samuel said. It's all here. We, Ellen's voice sharpened. Who's with you? 3 of Hutchins's guards. He left them to die when he blew the entrance. They helped me find the evidence. They're witnesses now. The lead guard laughed, a sound edged with hysteria. Witnesses. That's one word for it. He looked at Marcus with something like respect. You ran toward death to find truth. I ran toward death to survive. Funny how that works. Marcus began gathering documents, stuffing them into evidence bags one of the guards had in his tactical vest. The photographs, the ledger, the medical reports. But most importantly, the tape. Richard Blackwood's final testimony, preserved in the frozen dark, waiting for someone to care enough to find it. A new sound reached them from above. The distinctive whine of rescue equipment. Ellen's voice came through clear now. Stay where you are. We're sending down a rescue capsule through the ventilation shaft. Can you reach it? Marcus looked around the chamber, found the shaft opening in the ceiling. It angled upward, narrow but passable. Someone had installed a ladder, Samuel's work from years of maintenance. The shaft would bring them out near the surface structures, bypassing the collapsed main tunnel entirely. We can climb. Give us 20 minutes. Ellen's relief was audible. 20 minutes. FBI wants everything you found. Every document, every tape, every photograph. This time we're building a case that sticks. The climb took 30 minutes in reality, each man moving slowly in the brutal cold, stopping frequently to regain feeling in their extremities. Marcus led the way, the evidence bag strapped to his chest, the tape recorder cradled in his arms like something precious and fragile. They emerged into afternoon light that seemed impossibly bright after the darkness below. Rescue personnel swarmed them immediately, wrapping them in thermal blankets, checking vitals, loading them into ambulances. Marcus's core temperature had dropped to 94 degrees, borderline hypothermia. The guards were worse, one requiring immediate transport. But they were alive. And they had brought the evidence out of the mountain. Ellen met Marcus at the ambulance. FBI agent Sarah Chen beside her. Chen was 40s, sharp-eyed, holding a chain of custody form. Marcus handed over the evidence bag without prompting. Everything's in there. Documents proving fraud, medical records showing arsenic poisoning, photographs of illegal toxic waste dumping, a ledger showing bribery payments to county officials, and a tape, Robert Hutchins confessing to murder. Chen's eyes widened. You're telling me you found a 60-year-old tape recording that's still playable? Richard Blackwood sealed it in a dry chamber specifically to preserve it. Marcus's teeth chattered despite the blanket. The tape might be fragile, but it's there. His confession. Everything Samuel died trying to protect. Dale Hutchins sat in the back of a state police cruiser, hands cuffed, face pale. As Marcus was loaded into the ambulance, their eyes met through the window. The congressman's expression showed disbelief that had calcified into rage. He'd been untouchable for decades, and in a single morning, everything had crumbled. Tom appeared at the ambulance door, relief flooding his weathered face. You crazy son of a bitch. You actually did it. Samuel did it. I just finished what he started. No. Tom's voice went rough. Samuel protected it. You brought it home. There's a difference. The ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing, carrying Marcus toward the hospital in the valley below. Through the rear window, he watched the mine recede. Emergency vehicles clustered around the entrance, FBI teams preparing to document everything. The mountain that had swallowed so many lives, hidden so many secrets, had finally given up its truth. His phone buzzed as they descended into cellular range. Messages flooded in, dozens of them. Jennifer's name appeared repeatedly, but one message stopped him. Emma's voice, recorded audio. Daddy, Mommy says you're on the news. They're saying you're a hero. Are you okay? Please call me. I love you. Marcus closed his eyes, the phone pressed to his chest. The words he'd needed to hear for 3 years, delivered at the moment when he'd never been less sure he deserved them. At the hospital, they treated him for hypothermia and minor injuries. Chen arrived 3 hours later with a laptop and a digital recorder. The tape had been carefully digitized by FBI techs, the recording preserved for posterity. She hit play, and Robert Hutchins' voice filled the room, clear despite 6 decades of age. Richard, you have to understand, it's just business. The waste disposal contract pays better than the mine ever could. So what if some water gets contaminated? These mountains are full of water. People can find new wells. Richard's voice, weak but defiant. You're poisoning people, Robert. Children drink from those wells. A few might get sick. Small price for progress. And if you're feeling poorly yourself, well, that's unfortunate, but predictable. You've been drinking the same water as everyone else. You're confessing. You poisoned me deliberately. Robert's laugh, cold and mechanical. Confessing? To who? You? You'll be dead in a month and everyone will say it was your mine that killed you. The irony is beautiful, really. The environmentalists will use your death to shut down mining operations across the state. I'll buy the land cheap, clean it up with federal money, and develop it properly. Everyone wins. Everyone except the people you murdered. Murder requires intent, Richard. I just failed to mention that my waste disposal operation included your water supply. That's negligence at worst. And good luck proving even that once you're gone. The recording cut off. Chen closed the laptop. We've had linguists verify the voices. Robert Hutchins, confirmed through comparison with known recordings. Richard Blackwood, confirmed through Samuel's testimony and church recordings. This tape is admissible evidence in federal court. Marcus's hand still shook, though no longer from cold. Samuel lived 60 years knowing his father was murdered, knowing who did it, unable to prove it, until now. Chen pulled out a chair, sat facing him. Dale Hutchins is being charged with attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and about 24 federal corruption charges. His lawyers are already trying to deal, but the AG wants a trial. We want your testimony. What about the guards, cooperating fully? They're looking at reduced charges in exchange for testimony against Hutchins. And they're providing details about the Hutchins operation we never could have gotten otherwise. Turns out Dale's been running his father's playbook for decades. Toxic waste disposal, bribery, extortion. We're unraveling 40 years of corruption. Ellen appeared in the doorway carrying coffee and what looked like Marcus's phone. Thought you might need this. Your ex-wife's been calling every 10 minutes. Marcus took the phone, saw Jennifer's name on the screen. He answered before he could overthink it. Marcus, oh, thank God. Jennifer's voice broke. Emma saw the news. They're calling you a hero, saying you exposed a congressman. Are you okay? I'm okay. Hypothermic for a bit, but they've warmed me up. You could have died. Her voice shifted, something underneath the anger that sounded like fear. Emma was terrified. She kept asking if you were going to die like your father did. But I didn't. Marcus looked at Ellen and Chen, at Tom standing in the hallway. I found something worth protecting, and I brought it out. Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. Emma wants to talk to you. The phone exchanged hands, and then his daughter's voice, small and scared. Daddy? Hey, sweetheart, I'm okay, I promise. The news said you went into a mine that exploded. They said you almost froze to death. Her voice rose. Why would you do something so dangerous? Because sometimes the right thing is scary. Marcus closed his eyes, thinking of his father, of Samuel, of 60 years of silence. And because I needed to show you that your grandfather wasn't wrong to care about his work. He just needed to show me he cared about me too. I'm trying to do both. Are you coming home? Soon as they let me out of the hospital. And Emma, I'm going to do better. I'm going to be there for your school stuff, for everything. The mine is done. What matters now is you. Emma sniffled audibly. Promise, promise. Jennifer came back on the line. Richard Caldwell resigned this morning. Turns out he was on Hutchins's payroll, and now the Bar Association is investigating. I'm sorry, Marcus. I should have seen it sooner. We both made mistakes. Marcus's voice softened. But maybe we can do better going forward. For Emma, maybe. Jennifer paused. The custody arrangement. We can revisit it. If you want more time with her. I want to be her father. Whatever that takes. After the call ended, Marcus sat in the hospital room watching the mountain through the window. Somewhere up there, Samuel's mind stood open to the sky, evidence teams documenting everything Richard had hidden. The truth pulled from the frozen depths where it had waited for someone to care enough to dig. Tom entered, settling into the chair with a groan. Media's calling it the biggest corruption case in Colorado history. Hutchins's entire empire is collapsing. Business associates cutting ties, political allies claiming they barely knew him. It's beautiful. What happens to the land? Chen answered from the doorway. Federal investigation seizes all disputed property pending trial. But once the case concludes, assuming Hutchins is convicted, the land reverts to you as Richard Blackwood's rightful heir. Samuel's will holds up, and your claim is legitimate. Marcus thought about 40 acres of mountain wilderness, a mine full of ghosts, rails leading nowhere. I don't want it for silver or money. Samuel protected it because it represented something. His father's integrity, truth against power. Maybe it should stay that way. Tom smiled. Samuel would like that. He always said the mountain didn't belong to anyone. We just borrow it for a while, leave it better than we found it if we can. The news that evening led with the story. 60-year-old murder conspiracy exposed. Congressman indicted on federal charges. Hero miner risks life to uncover truth. Marcus's face appeared on screen, though he'd refused all interview requests. The talking heads discussed corruption and justice, but they couldn't capture what it had felt like in that frozen chamber, holding evidence that had waited decades to matter. Emma called again before bed. Daddy, kids at school are saying you're famous. I'm not famous, sweetheart. I just did what needed doing. Mommy says we can visit you this weekend. She says you earned it. Marcus's throat tightened. I'd like that. Maybe we could go somewhere warm. Beach or something. Get away from mountains for a while, Emma giggled. But you're a mountain hero. That's what the news said. Then maybe the mountain can do without me for a bit. Marcus smiled despite exhaustion pulling at him. I love you, Emma. Don't ever forget that. I won't. And Daddy, I'm proud of you. Grandpa would be proud too. Long after Emma hung up, Marcus lay in the hospital bed thinking about his father. Thomas Webb, dead under a mountain while fighting for something he believed mattered. Had he been proud of young Marcus? Had he wanted to tell his son that the work meant something beyond paychecks and danger? The questions would never have answers. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the point was to learn from the silence, to do better for the next generation. To show Emma that fighting for what's right didn't mean abandoning what's important. The door opened quietly and Ellen stepped in. Thought you might still be awake. She held out a folder. This is from the state police. They've been going through the evidence. More corruption? Worse, or better, depending on how you look at it. She opened the folder, showed him photographs from the Hutchins investigation. Your father's mine. Copper Ridge. Guess who owned it through a shell company? Marcus sat up slowly. Hutchins. Robert Hutchins bought it in 1968, ran it through proxies until Dale took over in the 90s. Every safety violation, every ignored warning, every death. She met his eyes. Your father didn't die because of bad luck, Marcus. He died because the Hutchins family has been killing workers for profit for 60 years. The revelation sat heavy, transforming grief into something sharper. My father was murdered too. Just took longer for the weapon to fall. FBI's opening cases on 12 mine deaths connected to Hutchins' operations. They're looking at manslaughter charges going back decades. Ellen's smile was fierce. You didn't just expose Samuel's father's murder. You've opened the door to justice for dozens of families, including yours. Marcus looked at his hands, still bruised from the climb, fingernails rimmed with dirt from the mountain. His father's hands had looked like this, scarred and strong, built for hard work. Thomas Webb had died trying to keep workers safe, documenting violations that no one would investigate. His son had finally finished the job. In the morning, they discharged him with instructions to rest and stay warm. Tom drove him back to the cabin, now surrounded by FBI vehicles and media vans kept at a distance by state police. The mine entrance had been secured, the collapsed section carefully excavated to preserve evidence. A bronze plaque had appeared overnight, erected by person or persons unknown. It read simply, Richard Blackwood, 1910-1963, Samuel Blackwood, 1952 to 2024. They protected truth when truth was dangerous. We remember. Tom stood beside Marcus, both men silent before the memorial. Someone cared enough to make this while you were in the hospital. Won't say who, but Ellen might have been involved. It's good, Marcus's voice rough. They should be remembered. They are now. Tom clapped him on the shoulder. Thanks to you, thanks to Samuel. I just followed the rails he left. That's all any of us can do. Follow the path someone else cleared, hope we add something valuable before passing it on. Tom gestured to the mountain. This place meant something to 3 generations of miners. Your father, Samuel's father, Samuel himself. Now it means something to everyone. A reminder that truth survives even when buried. Marcus spent 3 days at the cabin, recovering and preparing to return to Denver. Ellen visited daily with updates. Hutchins's lawyers were negotiating plea deals, but the evidence was overwhelming. Trial would begin in 6 months. The guards who'd helped Marcus had been released on their own recognizance, their testimony secured. On the 4th day, Jennifer's car appeared up the dirt road. Emma burst out before the engine stopped, running toward Marcus with her arms wide. He caught her, lifted her, felt her weight solid and real against him. You came. Mommy said we could stay the whole weekend. Emma pulled back, studying his face. You look different. Older? No. Happier. Jennifer approached more cautiously, but her expression had softened. Emma insisted, said she needed to see where her father became a hero. I'm not a hero, just someone who refused to quit. That's what heroes do, Marcus. They don't quit when quitting would be easier. Jennifer looked at the mine, at the mountain rising behind it. I'm sorry for saying you chose this over us. I understand now. You weren't choosing the mine. You were choosing to stand for something. Took me almost losing everything to figure out what actually mattered. Emma tugged his hand. Can you show me where you found the secret room? Not the secret room, sweetheart. It's too dangerous. But I can show you the entrance, tell you about Samuel and his father. Would that be okay? They walked to the mine entrance, the 3 of them, past the memorial plaque and the rails disappearing into shadow. Marcus told Emma about Richard Blackwood, about toxic waste and poisoned water, about a man who documented his own murder to protect others. He told her about Samuel, 60 years of solitary fighting, keeping truth alive through sheer determination. And then 3 men helped you escape? Emma's eyes were wide. Bad guys who turned good. Bad guys who realized being alive and doing right beats being dead and doing wrong. Marcus knelt to her level. Sometimes people make mistakes, Emma. Sometimes they work for the wrong side because they don't know better, or they're scared. What matters is what they do when they realize the truth. Like you and Mommy? The question hit harder than expected. Marcus glanced at Jennifer, saw her own surprise. Yeah, sweetheart, like me and your mommy. We made mistakes, but we're trying to do better. That night, Jennifer took the cabin's single bed while Emma insisted on sleeping next to Marcus on the cot. She curled against him the way she had when she was smaller, before the divorce had put distance between them. Daddy? Her voice drowsy in the darkness. Are you going to stay a hero? I'm going to try to be a good father. That's the only heroing I care about now. She was asleep within minutes, breathing deep and even. Marcus lay awake longer, listening to the wind in the pines, the distant sound of the mountain settling. The mine had taken so much from so many, but it had also given something back. Purpose. Proof that fighting mattered. The certainty that truth could survive even decades of burial. By morning, the world had shifted in small but meaningful ways. Jennifer made coffee while Emma explored the cabin, finding Samuel's photographs and asking questions about each face. Tom arrived with breakfast, and they ate together, four people connected by a mountain's secrets and the determination to honor them. The weekend ended too quickly. Emma cried when it was time to go, clinging to Marcus until Jennifer gently pried her loose. "We'll come back next weekend," Mommy promised. Marcus walked them to the car, Emma's hand in his until the last possible moment. As Jennifer started the engine, she rolled down the window. "The custody hearing is in 2 weeks. My lawyer will recommend 50-50, assuming you're staying in Colorado." "I'm staying." Marcus looked at the mountain, at Tom waving from the cabin porch. "Got some work to do here, making sure Samuel's story gets told right. Making sure the families of the other victims get their justice too." "Good." She put the car in gear, then paused. "Thank you, Marcus, for showing Emma what her grandfather's work meant. She needed to know he wasn't just a man who died underground. He was a man who died fighting. They all were. Every miner who went down never coming up. They weren't just workers, they were fighters." The car disappeared down the mountain road, leaving Marcus alone with Tom in the mine. They stood in comfortable silence until Tom finally spoke. "So what now?" "Now we make sure it matters." Marcus turned toward the cabin where Samuel's decades of evidence waited to be organized, presented, transformed into justice. "We help the FBI build cases. We testify. We make sure every family that lost someone to Hutchins' greed gets answers. That's a long fight. I've got time. And for once, I'm fighting for the right reasons." Tom smiled, weathered face creasing. Samuel would approve. He always said the mountain doesn't care about money or power. It only cares about truth. You found the truth, brought it out, and now you're seeing it through. That's the work that matters. They returned to the cabin as afternoon light stretched long across the valley. Inside, Samuel's carefully preserved evidence waited. Decades of one man's determination transformed into ammunition for justice. Marcus began organizing it, creating timelines, connecting names and dates. The work would take months, maybe years. But he had nowhere else he needed to be, no other purpose calling him. The mountain had given up its secrets, and he would honor them by making sure they changed everything. Outside, the rails gleamed in the fading light, leading into shadow and memory. They would rust eventually, succumb to weather and time. But the story they'd guided Marcus toward would survive, passed down through generations as proof that one person's dedication could outlast decades of corruption. The mountain would remember. And now, so would the world. 18 months transformed the landscape in ways Marcus couldn't have predicted that frozen morning when he'd first followed the rails into Samuel's mountain. The cabin stood rebuilt now, logs replaced where rot had weakened them, roof restored with proper shingles instead of rusted tin. Solar panels angled toward the southern sky, feeding batteries that powered lights in a small refrigeration unit. The place had become functional, almost comfortable, though Marcus still thought of it as Samuel's home more than his own. The mine entrance had been transformed more dramatically. Steel grating sealed the opening, allowing air circulation while preventing unauthorized access. A visitor's center occupied the old equipment building, its walls lined with photographs and documentation. Richard Blackwood's face gazed out from a frame beside his son's, both men finally receiving the recognition that had been stolen from them 60 years ago. Marcus stood before the display he'd assembled, reading the placard for perhaps the 100th time. The words never lost their weight, never stopped meaning something profound about what one person's refusal to quit could accomplish. The Blackwood Heritage Mine stands as testament to the cost of corruption and the enduring power of truth. Richard Blackwood, poisoned by those he trusted, died documenting crimes he couldn't prosecute. His son Samuel spent 6 decades protecting evidence powerful men wanted buried. Their persistence and the courage of those who finally brought that evidence to light resulted in the largest corruption prosecution in Colorado history and justice for families who waited generations for answers. Footsteps crunched on gravel behind him. Tom's voice carried the rasp that came from too many decades breathing mine dust, but also something lighter than Marcus remembered from their first meeting. "Tour groups here. 30 kids from Denver, plus teachers, Ellen's handling the safety briefing. Marcus turned to see the yellow school bus parked in the newly paved lot. Children poured out, excited voices echoing off the mountain. He recognized the teacher at the front, a woman in her 40s with graying hair and an expression that suggested she'd been teaching long enough to spot trouble before it started. Tom checked his watch. You've got them for 45 minutes. Level 1 tour, then workshop on mining safety and environmental responsibility. Ellen takes them through the legal case afterward. The educational program had been Marcus's idea, implemented with Ellen's help and funding from the federal settlement. Hutchins's assets had been seized and distributed with a portion designated for community education. The mine that had represented greed and murder now taught children about integrity and the importance of standing against corruption. Marcus addressed the group from the visitors' center steps, 30 young faces looking up with varying degrees of interest. Some were clearly here because their parents made them come. Others showed genuine curiosity, especially when Marcus mentioned that people had died for the secrets this mountain had kept. My name is Marcus Webb. 18 months ago, I inherited this mine from a man named Samuel Blackwood, who spent his entire adult life protecting evidence of murder and corruption. What you're going to see today represents his life's work and the work of his father before him. It's a story about what happens when powerful people think they're above the law, and what happens when ordinary people refuse to let them get away with it. A boy in the back raised his hand. Did you really almost die down there? I did. The mine entrance was blown up while I was inside, and I had to climb through frozen tunnels in -20-degree temperatures. 3 men who'd been hired to kill me ended up helping me survive because they realized the man who hired them was planning to let them die too. Marcus paused, letting that sink in. Sometimes people on the wrong side can still choose to do the right thing. That choice saved all our lives. The tour through Level 1 took 30 minutes, Marcus leading them past restored supports and ventilation systems Samuel had maintained. He showed them the ore carts Richard Blackwood had filled with silver, explained how the mining process worked, demonstrated how carbon monoxide detectors functioned and why they mattered. The children touched the cold stone walls, marveled at the darkness beyond their flashlight beams, and began to understand why this work had been both valuable and dangerous. In the equipment room where Samuel had lived during his deepest digs, photographs lined the walls. Richard Blackwood standing proud before his mine. Samuel as a young boy, then a teenager, getting through decades of solitary dedication. And newer photos showing Marcus emerging from the rescue capsule wrapped in thermal blankets. Dale Hutchins in handcuffs, the evidence room where federal agents had documented everything. One girl, maybe 10 years old, studied the photo of Samuel intently. He looked sad. Even when he's young, his eyes look sad. Marcus joined her, examining the photograph with fresh perspective. He lost his father when he was 11. Spent the rest of his life trying to honor that loss by protecting what his father died for. It's a heavy burden to carry alone. The girl turned to him, her expression serious beyond her years. But he wasn't alone at the end. You found him. You finished what he started. The words hit harder than expected, and Marcus had to swallow before responding. That's right. And now we make sure people remember. So the next time someone powerful tries to hurt innocent people, maybe someone will stand up sooner. Maybe the fight won't take 60 years. Ellen took over after the tour, walking the students through the legal case in terms they could understand. She'd quit the sheriff's department after the corruption purge that followed Hutchins' arrest, unable to work for an institution that had enabled so much harm. Now she ran Hayes Investigations, a private firm specializing in cold cases and corporate misconduct. Her first major case had been reopening the investigation into her husband's death, and the evidence Marcus had helped uncover made prosecution possible. Jack Hayes' case goes to trial next month. Ellen stood before a timeline showing connections between Hutchins' operations and worker deaths spanning 40 years. My husband documented safety violations that could have prevented his death and the deaths of others. The company buried his reports. Now, 15 years later, we have proof. Justice delayed but not denied. A teacher raised her hand. What happened to Congressman Hutchins? 25 years federal prison, no parole. Convicted on 14 counts, including murder conspiracy, witness tampering, bribery, and environmental crimes. His entire fortune was seized. Ellen's smile showed teeth. He'll die in prison, and his family name is destroyed. Sometimes the system works when enough people fight to make it work. After the students left, Marcus found Tom sitting on the cabin porch, whittling a piece of pine into something that might eventually become recognizable. The old man had aged noticeably in 18 months, moving slower, breathing harder, but his eyes remained sharp. "You're good with the kids." Tom's knife peeled long curls of wood. Samuel would have liked that. Turning his fight into education. Can't bring him back. Can't give him the years he lost. But maybe we can prevent the next Samuel from spending 60 years alone. Marcus settled into the chair beside him. "How you feeling? You look tired. Old is how I'm feeling." Tom set down the knife, examined his work. "Doctor says my lungs are shot. Too many years breathing dust. Silicosis. Same thing that got half the old miners I knew. How long? Could be years, could be months. Point is, there's work needs finishing before I go." Tom met his eyes directly. "Harold's drawing up papers to transfer the land to a trust. Educational use only, protected from development. Ellen's the primary trustee, you're secondary. Between you two, this place stays what Samuel wanted it to be. A memorial." Marcus looked out at the mountain, at the rails still visible beneath new gravel paths. "And a warning, both." Tom resumed whittling. "Also need to talk about the silver. Level 3 still sealed, but the ore carts Samuel filled are worth close to $2 million. That's your inheritance, legally speaking. I don't want it. Didn't think you would. But it needs deciding. That money could fund the educational program for decades. Could help families who lost people to Hutchins operations. Could do a lot of good if used right. Then use it right." Marcus stood, stretching muscles that still ached when altitude and cold combined certain ways. "Samuel didn't die protecting silver. He died protecting truth. The silver's just metal. What we do with it is what matters." Tom's smile creased his weathered face. "That's exactly what I told Harold you'd say. Papers will reflect your wishes. Every ounce gets sold. Money goes to the Memorial Trust. The Blackwood Foundation, we're calling it. Supporting families affected by corporate negligence and funding investigations into workplace safety violations." The phone in Marcus's pocket buzzed. Emma's name on the screen, right on schedule. She called every day at 4, a ritual they'd maintained since the custody arrangement had been finalized. 50-50 split, alternating weeks, with flexibility for school events and special occasions. Jennifer had been surprisingly reasonable once the legal pressure from Hutchins's associates had evaporated. "Hey, sweetheart, how was school?" Emma's voice bubbled with 11-year-old enthusiasm. "We learned about the skeletal system. Did you know you have 206 bones? I counted 3 times to make sure." "I did know that, actually. Broke a few of them over the years." Marcus walked toward the mine entrance, phone pressed to his ear. "What else happened?" Emma's tone shifted, becoming more serious. "Mom said the trial starts next week. The one about Grandpa's mine. Are you going?" "I am. Have to testify about the evidence we found." "It's important, Emma. Justice for your grandfather and 11 other families." "Can I come?" "I want to see you be brave." The request caught Marcus off guard. "Courtrooms aren't fun places, sweetheart. Lots of sitting and listening to lawyers argue. But you'll be there. And you're my dad. I should see what you're fighting for." Emma's voice carried a determination that reminded Marcus of himself at that age. "Please, let me talk to your mother. If she agrees, I'll arrange it." Jennifer's voice came on the line moments later. "She wants to go, Marcus. And honestly, I think she should. She needs to understand what her grandfather died for. Needs to see you stand up and tell the truth even when it's hard." "You sure?" "Some of the testimony will be graphic. Negligence, deaths, corporate cover-ups. She's 11. Old enough to understand that the world isn't always fair and that people have to fight to make it better." Jennifer paused. "Besides, I'm coming too. To support you. This is your father's justice as much as it is Jack Hayes' family's. Thank you." The words felt inadequate, but Marcus meant them completely. For everything. For Emma, for understanding, for not fighting me anymore. We both made mistakes. Jennifer's voice softened. "But watching you risk your life for truth, seeing how you've dedicated yourself to honoring Samuel and Richard and your father, I understand now. You weren't choosing work over family. You were trying to figure out what your father's sacrifice meant. Now you know. And now Mo knows. The trial began on a Tuesday in early October, federal courthouse in Denver, with media attention that rivaled major criminal cases. Dale Hutchins had fought the charges for 18 months, burning through legal fees that would have bankrupted lesser families. But the evidence Marcus had recovered from level 3 left little room for defense. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating, building from documents to photographs to testimony. Marcus sat in the witness gallery beside Ellen, watching prosecutors lay groundwork. They called forensic accountants who traced Hutchins' money through shell companies and offshore accounts. They called environmental scientists who testified about arsenic contamination in groundwater near the mine, poisoning that persisted even now, 60 years later. They called medical examiners who'd reviewed Richard Blackwood's exhumed remains, confirming arsenic levels consistent with deliberate poisoning over months. And they called family members, widows who'd lost husbands in mine collapses, children who'd grown up without fathers. Ellen's testimony about Jack's death, about 15 years spent knowing the truth but unable to prove it, left the courtroom silent except for quiet weeping. When Marcus's turn came on the fourth day, he'd had time to prepare mentally, but found himself unprepared for the weight of facing Hutchins across the courtroom. The former congressman sat at the defense table looking diminished, his expensive suit unable to hide the defeat in his posture. Their eyes met, and Marcus saw hatred there, impotent rage at being held accountable after decades of immunity. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Catherine Ross, guided him through the discovery, finding Samuel's letter, following the rails into the mountain, the confrontation with Hutchins at the upper building, the threats against Emma, the $50,000 bribe, the explosion that trapped him and the guards underground, the climb through frozen darkness to Section 7. Describe what you found in the hidden chamber. Ross's voice carried clearly through the courtroom's perfect acoustics. Marcus looked at the jury, 12 faces watching him with varying expressions of attention and sympathy. Filing cabinets containing 60 years of evidence, documents showing Robert Hutchins forged sale papers for the mine, medical records proving Richard Blackwood was poisoned with arsenic, photographs of toxic waste being dumped into the mine's water supply, a ledger showing bribery payments to county officials, and a tape recording of Robert Hutchins confessing to poisoning Richard Blackwood. The tape was played for the jury then, Robert Hutchins' voice filling the courtroom with casual admissions of murder and corruption. Marcus watched the jurors' faces, saw horror and disgust settle over them, saw the moment they understood exactly what had been hidden in that mountain for 6 decades. Ross continued, "Mr. Webb, at what point did you realize your own father's death was connected to the Hutchins corruption?" "When Ellen showed me ownership records for Copper Ridge Mine. Thomas Webb died there in 1985, crushed under a support beam during a collapse caused by safety violations. I learned the mine was owned through a Hutchins shell company, that inspectors had been bribed to ignore those violations, that my father had been documenting problems and trying to get them fixed." Marcus's voice remained steady despite the emotion tightening his chest. He died trying to protect other workers. The company blamed him, paid nothing, and kept running the same way. 12 more men died there before it finally closed. The defense attorney, a silver-haired man named Preston, who specialized in wealthy clients, cross-examined with predictable angles, suggesting Marcus had financial motive, implying the evidence could have been planted, questioning why Samuel had never brought this forward himself if it was so damning. Marcus answered each question patiently. Samuel tried to bring it forward. For 60 years he tried. Every authority he approached was either bribed or threatened into silence. He protected the evidence because that was all he could do. And when he died, he made sure someone outside the system would find it. Someone Hutchins couldn't buy or scare off. But you had financial motive. Preston's smile was oily. You were broke, freshly divorced, desperate for money. $50,000 must have seemed attractive. Yet you claim you refused? I refused because my daughter was watching. Marcus met Preston's eyes without flinching. Because men like your client only win when good people look the other way. And because Samuel Blackwood spent 60 years refusing to quit, and I couldn't dishonor that by taking blood money. Emma sat in the gallery between Jennifer and Tom, watching with wide eyes. She'd heard some of the story before, but hearing it laid out in formal legal language seemed to affect her differently. During the lunch recess, she found Marcus in the corridor. "Daddy, were you scared when you were trapped in the mine?" Terrified, Marcus knelt to her level. "Thought I might never see you again. Thought you'd grow up believing I'd abandon you like I thought my father had abandoned me. But you didn't abandon me." Emma's voice was fierce. "You fought for something important. You fought for Grandpa, and for Samuel, and for all the families who lost people. That's not abandoning, that's being brave." Jennifer joined them, placing a hand on Emma's shoulder. "She's been practicing that speech since we left home. Wanted to make sure you knew she understood." Marcus pulled Emma into a hug, feeling her thin arms wrap around his neck. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means everything." The trial concluded after 3 weeks of testimony. The jury deliberated for 7 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Dale Hutchins sat motionless as the verdicts were read, his attorneys already preparing appeals that would ultimately go nowhere. The evidence was too substantial, the testimony too consistent, the pattern too clear. Judge Marion Chen, a stern woman in her 60s who'd built a reputation for fairness, handed down sentencing 2 weeks later. 25 years federal prison on the primary counts. Additional sentences running concurrent. Full restitution to victims' families from seized assets. And a final statement that made national news. "Mr. Hutchins, your family built its fortune on the graves of honest workers. You inherited that corrupt legacy and perpetuated it for your own gain. You poisoned land, bribed officials, and attempted to murder multiple people to protect your crimes. This court sentences you not just for what you did, but for 60 years of injustice your family inflicted on communities that trusted you. May your time in prison serve as a reminder that no one is above the law and that truth, however long buried, will eventually come to light." The courthouse steps afterward filled with media and victim families. Ellen stood with Marcus, both of them fielding questions about the investigation and what came next. Marcus kept his answers brief, redirecting attention to the families who'd waited decades for acknowledgement. "This isn't about me being a hero. It's about Samuel Blackwood protecting evidence long enough for it to matter. It's about families who never gave up demanding answers. And it's about a system that finally, after too long, delivered justice." A reporter pushed forward. "What will you do with the mine now?" "Keep Samuel's legacy alive." Marcus gestured to Tom and Ellen. "We're establishing the Blackwood Foundation to investigate corporate negligence and support families affected by workplace safety violations. The mine becomes an educational site teaching about integrity and the cost of corruption. The Silver Samuel extracted funds that work." Another reporter called out, "Your daughter's here today. What do you want her to learn from this?" Marcus looked back at Emma, still standing with Jennifer, watching him with obvious pride. That her grandfather wasn't just a man who died underground. He was a fighter who tried to protect others. That Samuel wasn't just a hermit in a mountain. He was a guardian of truth. And that sometimes doing the right thing is scary and hard, but it's always worth it. That's the legacy worth passing on. The months that followed brought changes that rippled through Marcus's life, like water finding new channels through stone. The Blackwood Foundation launched officially in December with Ellen as executive director and Marcus as primary investigator. Their first cases came from families who'd seen the trial coverage and recognized similar patterns in their own losses. A woman in Wyoming whose husband had died in an oil field accident, safety violations documented but never prosecuted. A man in Utah whose brother had been killed in a construction collapse, inspectors bribed to approve substandard work. A widow in Montana whose husband's mining accident had been blamed on operator error despite clear evidence of equipment failure. Each case required investigation, documentation, legal action. Marcus found himself traveling regularly, interviewing witnesses, reviewing records, building cases that Ellen's legal team could prosecute or use to pressure settlements. The work was exhausting and often frustrating, but it carried a sense of purpose that mining for copper never had. Emma adapted to the rhythm, spending her weeks with Marcus at the mountain during his home stretches. She claimed Samuel's old cot as her own, decorated the cabin walls with drawings of miners and mountains, helped Tom organize the visitor center displays. She started asking questions about geology and engineering, wondering if maybe she'd study mining safety when she went to college. One evening in late January, snow falling thick outside the cabin windows, Emma sat at the table doing homework while Marcus reviewed case files. She looked up suddenly, pencil tapping against her textbook. "Dad, do you ever wish you'd taken Mr. Hutchins' money?" The question surprised him with its directness. Sometimes. When the foundation struggles for funding, or when families can't afford the investigations they deserve. But then I think about what that money represented. Blood money, paid to keep truth buried. And I know I made the right choice. Emma considered this, then returned to her work. After a moment, she spoke again without looking up. "Mom says you're a better person now than before the mine. Says you found something you'd been looking for since Grandpa died." "Your mom's pretty smart." Marcus set down the file. "What do you think?" "I think you're the same person you always were. You just finally figured out what mattered." Emma met his eyes, expression serious. "Like Samuel did. He could have left the mountain, but the mountain was where truth lived. So he stayed." "That's very wise for 11 years old." "I'm almost 12, Emma grinned, "and I've been paying attention." Tom's health declined through the winter, despite doctors' best efforts. By March, he'd moved into the cabin full-time, unable to manage the stairs at his own house in Silver Pine. Ellen visited daily, bringing groceries and medicine, sitting with him through the worst of the coughing fits that left him exhausted and gray. Marcus was there the night Tom sat him down with whiskey and the kind of seriousness that meant important words were coming. The fire crackled in the stove, snow pelting the windows, and Tom looked smaller than Marcus remembered from their first meeting. "I need to tell you something about Samuel." Tom's voice was rough, worn, something I've never told anyone. Marcus waited, letting the silence stretch. "I knew he was going to die." Tom stared into his glass. "Month before it happened, he came to me, said his heart was giving out, that doctors gave him weeks at best. He'd prepared everything, the inheritance papers naming you, the letter with instructions, the map, even the memorial plaque he commissioned himself, stored in my garage with orders to install it after he passed. He planned his own memorial. He planned everything." Tom's eyes grew distant, said he couldn't let Hutchins win even in death, said the mine needed to pass to someone who'd fight, someone with nothing left to lose but also a daughter to fight for, someone who'd understand what it meant to lose a father before you could make peace. He chose me specifically. Marcus felt the weight of that settle. Not random inheritance, strategic. He researched you, found out about your father, about your divorce, about Emma, saw someone whose life paralleled his own just enough to understand. Tom drained his glass. "Samuel was brilliant, Marcus, brilliantly stubborn. He spent 60 years setting up one final move, using his own death as the trigger to bring everything down. That's a heavy burden to carry alone. That's why he made sure you wouldn't carry it alone. Made sure you'd find me, find Ellen, find the evidence before Hutchins could stop you." Tom met his eyes. "You think you failed your father by not understanding his fight while he lived. Samuel made sure you'd get a second chance to honor that kind of dedication. Made sure Emma would see you choose right." The revelation sat between them like a third presence. Marcus thought back to that first letter from Harold Brennan, the inheritance that had seemed so random. Nothing had been random. Samuel had orchestrated everything from beyond the grave, turning his death into a weapon against the corruption that had killed his father. Did he know I'd survive? No, but he believed you'd try, and he believed that trying would be enough to crack Hutchins's armor. Tom smiled faintly. Man was brilliant at reading people, brilliant at planning, and brilliant at knowing when to trust others to finish what he started. Tom died in early April, peacefully in his sleep, with Ellen and Marcus sitting vigil. They buried him beside Samuel in the small cemetery overlooking the mine. Two men who'd fought the same fight generations apart, together in death as they'd been in life. Harold Brennan spoke at the service, talking about his father's integrity and dedication. Ellen read from Samuel's journals, passages about Tom's friendship and support through lonely decades. Marcus spoke last, keeping it simple. "Tom taught me that the fight matters more than the victory, that standing up counts even when you lose. He lived that truth his whole life, and he made sure Samuel's truth survived long enough to matter. We honor him by continuing that work." Emma laid flowers on both graves, Samuel's and Tom's, then stood holding Marcus's hand while snow fell light and cold. She'd grown taller in the past year, would turn 12 in 2 weeks, already showing hints of the woman she'd become. Her resemblance to Jennifer was strong, but Marcus saw something of himself there too. Stubbornness, determination, the unwillingness to accept easy answers. They're together now. Emma's voice was matter-of-fact. Samuel and Mr. Tom, probably arguing about mining techniques and drinking coffee. Probably. Marcus squeezed her hand. They earned their rest. The foundation's work expanded through spring and summer. Ellen hired 2 additional investigators, established partnerships with law firms willing to take cases pro bono, developed relationships with media outlets that covered corporate negligence stories. The Blackwood Foundation became known in certain circles as the place families went when everywhere else had failed them. Marcus found himself giving talks at colleges and industry conferences, explaining how the evidence from Level 3 had been preserved and what it revealed about long-term corruption patterns. He always brought Samuel's photographs, showing the progression from young boy to old man, 60 years of solitary dedication visible in the aging of his face. One presentation at the Colorado School of Mines drew an audience of over 300 students and faculty. A young woman in the front row raised her hand during the Q&A, her expression troubled. How do you prevent this from happening again? If powerful people can hide crimes for 60 years, what's to stop the next Hutchins? Marcus considered the question carefully. Nothing stops them permanently. Corruption adapts, finds new methods, new ways to hide. What we can do is make the cost higher, make the evidence harder to destroy, support whistleblowers and investigators. And most importantly, raise a generation that understands integrity isn't optional. It's fundamental. But that takes time. The woman's frustration was evident. Decades, like Samuel. Yes, but every case we prosecute makes the next one easier. Every family that gets justice inspires another to keep fighting. Every student who learns this history becomes someone who might stand up instead of looking away. Marcus gestured to the photograph of Samuel on the screen behind him. This man died before seeing justice for his father, but his work ensured that justice came eventually. Sometimes that's the best we can do. Plant seeds we won't live to see grow. The woman nodded slowly, something settling in her expression. Then we keep planting. Exactly. By fall, the visitor center was hosting school groups weekly. The tours had expanded to include workshops on geology, environmental science, and ethics. Marcus and Ellen alternated leading them, with occasional help from Harold Brennan when legal questions arose. Emma had become an unofficial junior guide, helping younger children understand the equipment and answering questions with the confidence of someone who'd absorbed the story completely. One October afternoon, a group from a private academy in Denver arrived with their teacher, a man in his 60s who'd specifically requested this tour. He waited until the other students had moved into the Level 1 entrance before approaching Marcus. I'm Robert Hutchins III, Dale's nephew. The man's hands trembled slightly. I wanted to see this place, to understand what my family did. Marcus studied him carefully, seeing genuine distress in the man's face. What your family did isn't your responsibility. No, but understanding it is. Robert gestured toward the mine. My father cut ties with Dale years ago, moved the family to Boston, changed our name back to our mother's maiden name. But the guilt doesn't disappear because we changed names. The money that paid for my education came from corruption and death. What do you want from me? Nothing, just to see and to remember. Robert pulled out a checkbook, and to donate to the foundation, whatever helps undo even a fraction of the damage. Marcus accepted the check, noting the amount with surprise. This is substantial. It's not enough. Could never be enough. But maybe it helps the next family get justice faster. Maybe that's worth something. After Robert left with his students, Ellen found Marcus standing before the memorial plaque, the check still in his hand. She read the amount and whistled low. That's 6 months of operating budget. Where'd it come from? Dale Hutchins' nephew came to understand what his family did, wanted to help make it right. Marcus folded the check carefully. Funny how guilt works. Sometimes the next generation tries to atone for the previous one's sins. Think it's possible? Ellen's voice carried decades of her own guilt about not solving Jack's case sooner. To make amends for crimes you didn't commit? I think trying is what matters. Marcus looked at the plaque at Richard and Samuel's names carved in bronze. Samuel spent 60 years trying to make amends for not being able to save his father. I spent years trying to understand why my father died. Maybe the point isn't success. Maybe it's the refusal to stop trying. That's exhausting philosophy. Yeah, but it's the only one that seems to work. December brought the anniversary of Marcus's first arrival at the mine, 2 years since he'd stood in a courthouse signing away everything except his truck and the deed to land he'd never seen. He marked the occasion quietly, hiking up to the sealed Level 3 entrance alone on a morning when new snow covered everything in pristine white. The ventilation shaft that had saved his life 2 years ago was now properly secured with grating and safety equipment. Marcus stood at its edge, looking down into darkness that had nearly killed him, remembering the cold and fear and desperate climb toward truth. His phone buzzed. Emma's message showed a photo she'd taken yesterday, Marcus teaching a group of students how to read geological surveys. The caption read, "Dad being awesome. Love you." He typed back, "Love you too, sweetheart. See you tonight." Another message appeared, this one from Jennifer. Emma's teacher wants her to write an essay about someone she admires. Guess who she picked? Her father, I hope. Marcus smiled at the phone. Better. She picked Samuel, says he's the bravest person she never met, said she's going to be that kind of brave when she grows up. The words hit hard, unexpectedly emotional. Marcus sat on a boulder, snow soaking through his jeans, and let himself feel the full weight of what the past 2 years had cost and given. His father's death had meaning now, connected to a larger pattern of injustice that he'd helped expose. Samuel's life had purpose beyond solitary suffering, transformed into education and ongoing investigation. And Emma understood that some fights were worth the sacrifice. Tell her Samuel would be honored, and tell her I'm proud of her. I will. Jennifer's next message came after a pause. I'm proud of you too, Marcus. Took me years to understand, but I do now. You're a good man fighting a good fight. Emma's lucky to have you. The Foundation's second anniversary gala took place in April, held at a hotel in Denver, with donors and supporters from across the state. Ellen had organized everything, turning it into both fundraiser and memorial for those who'd been lost to corporate negligence. Photographs lined the walls, each one showing a worker who'd died in preventable accidents, their families still waiting for acknowledgement or justice. Marcus wore a suit that Tom had left him, altered to fit, and felt uncomfortable in the formal setting. But Emma insisted he needed to be there, needed to let people see the face of the Foundation's work. She'd come with Jennifer, both of them dressed up, Emma's excitement about the fancy party overriding Marcus's discomfort. The keynote speaker was a senator who'd introduced legislation strengthening workplace safety enforcement. She referenced the Blackwood case repeatedly, calling it a watershed moment in corporate accountability. When she finished, Ellen took the stage to present the Foundation's achievements. In 2 years, we've investigated 43 cases of workplace negligence, secured settlements for 31 families, brought criminal charges in 7 cases, supported legislation in 4 states. She paused, looking out at the audience. None of this would be possible without the evidence Samuel Blackwood protected or the courage of people like Marcus Webb, who risked everything to bring that evidence to light. Applause filled the room. Marcus shifted uncomfortably until Emma elbowed him. Stand up, Dad. They're clapping for you. They're clapping for Samuel. And for every family still fighting. Same thing. Emma's smile was radiant. You're helping them fight. That's what heroes do. Later, during the reception, a woman approached Marcus with tears in her eyes. She was perhaps 40, dressed simply, holding a photograph of a young man in mining gear. My brother. He died in a collapse 5 years ago in Wyoming. Company blamed him, paid nothing. I've been trying to get someone to investigate, but no one would help. She held out the photo. Until I saw your Foundation's work. Ellen's team is looking into it now. We might finally get answers. Marcus took the photo, studying the young man's face. He looked maybe 25, grinning at the camera, whole life ahead of him. I'm sorry for your loss. Don't be sorry. Help me get justice. The woman's grip tightened on his hand. That's all any of us want. Someone to finally tell the truth about what happened. That's what we're here for. Marcus handed back the photo. Ellen will make sure your brother's case gets the attention it deserves. After she left, Emma appeared at his elbow with a plate of fancy appetizers. That lady was crying. Was she okay? She lost her brother, similar to how I lost my father. But she's going to get answers now. That's what the foundation does. Gives people the truth they deserve. Emma popped a small quiche into her mouth considering this. Truth is expensive, huh? All this work, all these people investigating, and lawyers and everything. Very expensive. That's why we need donations and supporters. Why we have events like this. But you do it anyway, right? Even if there was no money? Emma's eyes were serious. Because it's the right thing? Marcus thought about Samuel, 60 years of unpaid dedication. About his father, documenting violations no one would investigate. About all the families still waiting for someone to care enough to fight for them. Yeah, we do it anyway. Some things matter more than money. That's what I thought. Emma smiled. That's what I wrote in my essay about Samuel. Said he proved that one person refusing to quit could change everything. Teacher gave me an A. The evening ended with a video presentation showing the mine, the visitor center, students learning about integrity and corporate responsibility. Samuel's face appeared on the screen, young and old, showing the passage of time and the consistency of purpose. Richard's photograph followed, then Tom's, then Jack Hayes's. A memorial to those who'd fought and lost, and a promise that their fights hadn't been forgotten. Marcus stood with Ellen and Emma, watching the faces of workers killed by negligence scroll past. 43 new cases in 2 years, 43 families who'd reached out for help. How many more were still waiting? How many would never know the foundation existed? The work would never end. Corruption would adapt and continue. Powerful people would keep cutting corners and endangering workers. But now there was a dedicated organization pushing back, documenting abuses, supporting families, demanding accountability. That was Samuel's legacy, built on his father's sacrifice, enabled by Marcus's refusal to take Hutchins' bribe, a living monument to the idea that truth mattered more than money, that justice was worth fighting for even when the fight seemed impossible. On the drive back to Silver Pine, Emma fell asleep against Marcus's shoulder. Jennifer drove, comfortable silence between them, the kind that came from shared understanding rather than awkward distance. When they reached the cabin, Marcus carried Emma inside, tucking her into Samuel's old cot while she mumbled sleepily about fancy parties and important work. Jennifer lingered in the doorway, looking around the cabin that had become Marcus's home. It's different from how I imagined. More lived in, more real. It's where the work happens. Marcus gestured to the files stacked on the table, the photographs on the walls. This is what Samuel built, what we're trying to maintain. Emma understands that. She's proud of you, Marcus. Really proud. Jennifer smiled. I'm proud of you too. Took me too long to say it, but I am. We both grew up. Just took a mountain full of secrets to make it happen. After Jennifer left, Marcus stood on the porch watching the moon rise over the peaks. The mine entrance glowed faintly in the darkness, emergency lighting installed for safety. The rails caught moonlight, twin lines of silver leading into memory and forward into purpose. His phone showed a message from Ellen, sent during the drive. Good news, Wyoming case is solid. Company knew about the safety violations. We've got emails proving they ignored them. Criminal charges, likely. Another case moving toward justice. Another family that would get answers. It wouldn't bring back the dead, couldn't undo the loss. But it proved that people were paying attention now, that the cost of negligence had increased, that the next company might think twice before cutting corners. That was the victory Samuel had made possible. Not perfect justice, but persistent accountability. Not immediate change, but steady pressure towards something better. Marcus returned inside, checking on Emma one last time before settling into his own cot. She slept deeply, 12 years old, and already understanding what her grandfather had died for, what Samuel had protected, what was worth fighting for even when victory seemed impossible. The mountain breathed through ventilation shafts, that steady draw of air that Samuel had maintained for 60 years. In the morning, another tour group would arrive. More students learning about integrity and courage. More families hearing that someone still fought for the truth that powerful people wanted buried. The work would continue. It had to. Because Samuel had spent a lifetime proving that one person's refusal to quit could outlast decades of corruption. Because Richard had died documenting crimes he couldn't prosecute, but believed someone eventually would. Because Marcus's father had tried to protect workers, even knowing the company wouldn't listen. Their legacy lived in the foundation, in the students who learned their story, in every family that found answers because someone had fought to create an organization dedicated to truth. Marcus closed his eyes, listening to Emma's quiet breathing, feeling the mountain's weight above and around them. The rails outside would rust and fade eventually, succumb to weather and time, but the path they'd marked would remain, carved into memory and purpose, guiding others toward the understanding that some things were worth dying for because they made life worth living. Truth, justice, the refusal to let corruption win simply because fighting was hard. That was Samuel's gift, purchased with 60 years of solitude and sacrifice. That was what Marcus would protect, expand, and pass on to Emma and everyone else willing to believe that one person's dedication could still change everything. The mountain stood eternal in the moonlight, holding its stories, breathing its steady rhythm. And in the cabin at its base, 2 generations slept, connected to the past and committed to a future where truth mattered more than power, and where ordinary people could stand against corruption and sometimes, eventually, win.